thank you all. Thank you, Richard, first of all, and thank you all for joining this session. And I'm really honored to be hosting this on behalf of Bridget today. In case of, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Veronica Mihai, and I've been in the Bigger Pie for a long time now, and I'm an avid supporter of Bridget and the Bigger Pie. You all know, I assume, what the Bigger Pie is, so I'm not going to go too much into that. Our host and speaker for the day is Richard Foster-Fletcher. He's the chair and host of mki.org, professional keynote speaker. And I'm sure that he is, I've known Richard for a while, and I think we did speak on other occasions and on other panels and other events. So I know for sure he's a great person who is going to bring a lot of value to us today. Richard, if you want to take it forward from here, that would be great.
Well, thank you so much for those kind words. I was on a panel many months ago, an event where I had the imposter syndrome because my colleagues on the panel were all senior people from the United Nations. I have a bachelor's in music and drama, by the way, and I thought, what on earth am I doing here? They've put the wrong person up. And the first question went out, and my esteemed colleague from the UN took 14 minutes to answer it. I thought, that's why I'm here, because there's brevity. So welcome, everybody. It's wonderful to spend time with you. I spent quite a bit of time actually doing public speaking training not that long ago before we launched mkai.org. So when Bridget asked if I could come and speak to you today, it's my privilege to do so, and I'm so glad to be here. There are some rules and principles to public speaking that some people don't know, and I think one has to know them. You can break the rules all that you want, but I think you should know when you're breaking a rule. And we'll cover that today. We're going to talk about panels, but I would say I'm no expert on getting the best out of a panel. So I prefer that to be a more rounded conversation. But I will share a little bit about my experiences. Interrupt me anytime, please, please, please. Put your microphones on unless you've got really noisy background. I'd love to see people's cameras. I'd love to see your name. If you're here to learn about public speaking and you've turned your camera and microphone off other than technical reasons, then it's not the greatest start to wanting to do more public speaking. That's all I'd say about that. So 22 of us today, that's wonderful. In the chat, if you can just tell me what interests you most. Is it online speeches or is it in person? So just write online or in person and get a feel of where everybody's at now. And welcome new joiners as well. Both, yeah, okay, that's fine. Both online, I see. I feel I'm better in person, yeah, conferences, okay. Which is less daunting? Which is easier? So I'll just write easier there, and we'll put a break in there. So now, which is more comfortable for people? Online. Okay. Virtual is easier. Okay, so just Monica, your camera's on. Why is it easier?
Because I think when it's the whole real life experience, when you're about to go on stage or when you're talking to all the other panelists in person and all these buzzwords and all these agenda setting is going around, and then there's people there that are looking at you already. So it's just a whole vibe, and it's sort of like it's sort of a build up before you get on stage. Okay, and usually there's cameras there in your face or whatever. Yeah.
You don't feel that today or when you're...
No, because I feel really comfortable where I am when I don't have the whole scene around me.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. You can cheat online. You certainly can. Leah, you said in person though, so that's interesting. If you could share your experience. Roxana, did you? Sorry. Please.
Yeah, for me, I think it's easier in person because you can get, or at least I get a better feeling of the vibe and how people are responding. But online, I've never felt completely comfortable. I think that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I share that. Yeah, I remember the first online workshop I delivered, and I thought this will be easy. And after an hour and a half of talking into blank space, I thought this is the most miserable 90 minutes of my life. Is anybody listening? This is bizarre. Okay, who else answered there? Simone said online. Aurelia as well. Jerry, any other reasons that we haven't heard so far as to one preference or the other? Mandeep, do you want to share yours?
I actually feel nervous in both, to be honest. So it's actually a big achievement for me to be having my camera on and actually conversing on the group. So I'm really pleased to be part of this today.
And why do you think you feel nervous?
I don't know. I just feel like I get really sweaty. My hands are actually sweating as I'm speaking to you now. I just get really anxious and really sweaty. I just feel like what I'm going to say is not going to have anything of real value. Even I can't even sometimes get my sentence out correctly. I get so nervous.
Okay. And what do you think where do they come from though? Is it just the feeling of attention on you, or is it something else, do you think?
Yeah, I think it's the attention on me. I think it's just, having all eyes on me, everyone listening to what I'm saying. It's just that part that I struggle with. And once I get going, I'm actually okay. It's just the initial introduction and actually starting the conversation off. And then once I start, I'm actually okay.
I joined Toastmasters about a decade ago, and the reason was I was quite a young guy in sales. So I'm 39 now, so I was 25 or something. And being in sales, often you go out and meet CEOs in your formative years, and it is incredibly intimidating. And I couldn't look them in the eye around the table. And I said, like you said, Mandy, I felt they must know this. There's no way I know something they don't. So I'm just wasting their time. And they should just tell me to go. And over the years, I just got my eyes just to meet theirs. That was like success, just to hold their gaze. Jerry, what's your preference? Do you have one?
I think online there are less dimensions with online. In an auditorium setting, I'm conscious of people fidgeting, or somebody might stand up and walk out to go to the bathroom, or there's much more information to take in while you're speaking. Whereas I feel more in control when I'm online.
Okay. And Alex and Alexa, I'll just ask the two of you as well before we jump into some content. Alex, you first. What's your preference?
I was waiting for the background noise to disappear. So my preference is in person, actually, because I like to make eye contact with people in the audience. Or if I feel uncomfortable, I like to stare at some spots just above their heads and like somewhere there out in the abyss. So yeah, I really like that contact. And when it comes to online events, we kind of lose that momentum when you're talking to someone and switching gaze to from one person to another, and you can feel their interaction, you can feel they're looking at you, they want to hear something from you. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to online events, you don't know where to look. There are too many faces and you're never looking someone straight in the eyes. So I miss that eye gaze, that focus.
And myself, I never had the concept of staring at myself during a meeting. That's a COVID thing, isn't it? Wow, you realize that your face isn't straight. Never mind.
Yeah, it's
Didn't know that.
It's not symmetric at all.
I've embarrassed myself. And finally, Alexa, what would be your preference? What do you enjoy more?
To be honest, I don't like either.
And why is that?
It's because how to put it, I'm very much used to being more a back end person, right? I make things happen, but from the back end, and just not talk to people in general, both personally. And I'm just not much of a people person, to be honest, and I don't feel comfortable around people. So getting on a stage and holding a presentation or even doing it online, I've been doing it online for the past several months, and to be honest, it was a huge challenge. When I need to talk about something, I'm really good at answering questions and explaining. But when I'm supposed to talk and talk and talk, is just not something that I generally do, even in my personal life. Okay. I answer questions, I don't ask many questions, and I don't talk much. So
okay. All right, you're in the right place then, I promise you. We'll talk about this in a second. Hey, Simone, good to see you. Did you want to add something or just pop your camera on?
If you can unmute,
My
Simone.
lip reading's okay. So
I'll try.
I'm making jewelry, so I have my camera and what's it called? Yeah, I'm on mute because of that. It's very noisy.
No problem at all. I'm glad you're with us.
But I think both is quite daunting. But I think in person is probably the scariest for me.
Okay, all right.
Not scary,
Me too.
but just, yeah, I agree with what's been said.
Or what's that odd expression that some people would rather be in the box than delivering the eulogy, right? And okay, does anybody have a positive reframing for nervousness? Does that make sense? Does anybody have a flip side of looking at this in terms of what about these nerves that we feel? Yeah.
Oh,
Sure.
So for example, when lockdown happened and we all moved back home and we had to switch on our cameras to speak to our team and we're looking at ourselves, I couldn't do that. I had to switch my camera off. I couldn't look at myself and talk at the same time. So I noticed if I don't concentrate on the faces looking at me or looking at myself on camera, then I can just talk freely.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's just the eyes looking at me and me looking out at myself.
Interesting. Veronica, it looked like you were going to add something.
Well, usually, so I did deliver a couple of keynotes, and I did mainly panel speaking. And I noticed that I'm more comfortable in panel speaking rather than keynotes. On panel, I'm extremely comfortable. I can discuss with people. I like the interaction, and I feel myself. When I go into a keynote, however, I start feeling nervous because everybody's attention is on me, and I can't breathe properly, so I rush through it. And the only way that I feel that I gather my courage to go out there and speak is I think to myself that it doesn't matter whether I do well or not. Ultimately, I am there to just deliver a message, and who wants to hear me will hear me, and some will like me and some will not. But ultimately, I just take that out of my mind, about what other people feel or what other people think about me.
Yes, indeed. There's that parable of the man walking along with his donkey on a hot day, and his couple mutters as he walks past, "What a fool, it's such a hot day, he could be riding that donkey." So he hops on the donkey, and the next couple walk past and they mutter and they say, "Goodness me, forcing that donkey to carry him on such a hot day." So he jumps off the donkey and puts the donkey on his shoulders and carries it. And the next couple mutter and they go, "What a fool, carrying that donkey. He could just be walking alongside it and the donkey would be perfectly happy." And of course, we can't please all the people all the time, can we? No matter what we do. I mean, trust me, in my role, whatever we do in MKI, somebody tells me we're idiots. So it's not like this way almost every day. The thought about nervousness that someone shared with me, and I think I've kept it close to my heart really, is that it means we care. Like it might just be nerves, right? Like, oh my God, all these eyes on me. And that's a feeling for sure. But if you've got the butterflies in your stomach, you can just go, wow, that means this matters to me. It means I care. And it means I'm coming out of my comfort zone. What an incredible opportunity then. And I drove to town the other day to a meeting and I had butterflies on my stomach. I thought, but this is great. Then I'm doing something of significance here then, if it's scaring me this much. So it can be very much a positive thing. I'm going to show a few slides. I'm not a big slide guy, but I think I mentioned a moment ago, there's some lessons around public speaking that I just want to share with you that I've learned from over a decade in Toastmasters. I've written a book about public speaking on Amazon and related to Toastmasters and done a lot of speaking, including some competitions, and I have been paid myself several £1,000s on quite a few occasions to deliver talks. This comes to a point a moment ago, and I'm just trying to think, my screen has changed around slightly. We talked about not wanting to be in the limelight, and I think this is the most important slide that I want to share with you today, that great speakers are made, not born. And this is, there are people who like the sound of their own voice. There are people who are naturally confident. There are people who have presence. It doesn't mean they're the best speakers. The best speaker is somebody who can impart their message successfully to you. That is not usually the person who likes the sound of their own voice. Quite the opposite. They're just going to fill this space up with noise. And I want to share an example with you here. So what I've got in the deck today, right down the bottom here, I've got slides that I'm not going to show you today, but I've got the deck to share with you, and they're just reference slides for you to look through, okay? So I never do slides with text in them. The reason they're here is just so that you have them later on to refer back to you. The deck is available. Let's just put that up now. I've popped it up onto just a Dropbox link, and you can just click that now, and then you just have it on your tab, right? And then just message me or LinkedIn or whatever if you don't manage to grab it. Okay, so, and that has been moved, so we can just pop that out there. So the lessons around public speaking is that you've got 3 elements you can call on: ethos, pathos, and logos, the Latin terms. That means that you've got these 3 tools in your kit bag: credibility, emotion, and logic. And it's tempting to think that credibility and logic are the most important. It's tempting to think, I should tell you all about what a brilliant speaker I am at the start, because that way I build credibility and you're more likely to listen to me. But public speaking is counterintuitive. It doesn't work like that. And what we actually do is we relate. And this won't be a great surprise to the talented people in this room, but it's the pathos. It's the ability for us, through the power of stories and our narratives and our own lives, is to form a connection with our audience. That is where the power of public speaking is. And that needs to be backed up by credibility and logic. But if you rely on credibility and logic without focusing on emotion, you will not make the connection with your audience that you desire. Let's give you an example of that. There's a book called Talk Like TED. Anybody read it in the chat maybe, or just put your microphone on? Anybody seen this book? It goes through some of the most famous TED Talks, and it talks about this guy here, Brian Stevenson. And he talked about injustice around the world. And this was a well-watched talk, 1.5 million views or something like this. But they calculated, so he actually was given over $1 million in checks by the people in the auditorium on that day when he delivered that talk. So they call it the presentation worth $55 a minute. And he did it by this ratio here. So 65% of the time when he was speaking, he was just using his emotion, and he was connecting. He talked about his grandmother and his upbringing. Then 10% of the time, let's go back and see this, ethos, he called on his credibility. And 25% of the time, he called on statistics, the data, the information. So he got paid $1 million cash by calling on this ratio. And so if you've got a call to action in your talk, this is the kind of ratio that we want to look at. So I'll pause there for a second because I don't want to go into too many slides. We're going to jump into first impressions in just a moment. But what questions, what have you seen before about these different areas that we can call on? Let me have a look. Who's on? Teresa, what have you seen this before?
Ethos, pathos, and logos. No, I've not seen that before.
Okay. And the last speech that you gave, what do you think your ratio was? How much do you think you were calling on logic, credibility, or emotion?
I think that depends on the audience, because usually if it's a work sort of related thing, given the people that I speak to, I tend to go down the logic and credibility route. I think that's what the last speech was on. Okay. And is that reading the audience, or dare I say, do you think there's a safety in that? I think that some of it's due to the stereotype that I'm a woman, and if I get emotional, the message that I'm trying to get across is often sort of not heard as well. Okay. I would say that, the audience being white males, sort of people in finance, they like, or the language that they tend to speak more, should we say, is of logic. Well, that's how I feel.
Does anybody else feel that way?
Yes, I think I would have to agree. I think I normally focus on the logic as well. But funny enough, when I listen, I normally connect with the emotional side of someone speaking, but I don't deliver that myself because I'm just not confident in having that delivery. So I myself do focus more on the logical side.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Aurelie? Oh, you put your hand up just as I was looking at you. That's funny.
Yes. Yeah, so I am agree with the messages before, because we are in a financial industry. So usually you get to the facts, or the IT industry, you get to the facts. But sometimes then I feel that people said you are too detailed. If you go emotional, then you are too emotional as a woman. So I think it's really a conflict there. And it depends about the audience. Right now, I am working as a Scrum Master. So this emotion part is for me very important, and I can really use it. But usually when you are talking to management, it's not possible, I guess.
Yeah, I can imagine the type that you're referring to. And you know what? I mean, we have these meetings, don't we? I mean, I do anyway, you know, where you're kind of pitching what you do in a way. Maybe it's a partner, not necessarily a client. And a person, quite often a man, will start the meeting and go, so what do you want then? What can I do for you? And the company Tim Berners-Lee has started. I met with them, and that was how the meeting started. So Richard, what can I do for you? And I'd never met the person. I thought, well, even if I told you, why on earth would you do it for me? You know, we don't know each other. Why do you just grant favors like a genie or something? But I think that the challenge here, I'm going to jump around a little bit because I think, you know, we'll follow the course of the conversation. This is a book from Carmen Simon, Impossible to Ignore, creating memorable content to influence decisions. So she said that 10% of something will be remembered when you give a talk. Anybody? That's a pretty easy one, to be honest. 10% of what? Veronica, help me out. It's very simple.
10% of the information that you're
exactly
that you're saying.
Yeah, 10% of what you say. Yeah. So I won't change that. Veronica, you won't change that. Monica, you won't change that. Right? I could go on. Nobody will change that statistic, right? Your audience will only remember 10% of what you say. You'll only remember 10% of what I'm saying now, right? So the important thing is to try and direct your audience attention to the right 10%, rather than it being a random 10%. That's the only thing in your control. And then if we're delivering something with visuals, again, a very easy one, 4 out of 20. What might that be? Jerry?
Slides.
That's exactly it. They're going to forget 16 out of 20 of your slides. You cannot change that, okay? So your job is to direct their attention onto that. Now, the challenge with that, and I'm going to come to starting a speech in a minute, but I must follow this train of thought. And because I'm not presenting, I'm just going to move this out of the way in a second. So we're talking about cognitive dissonance. That's one of the reasons why. So let me remove that box. And so this is the challenge here. Obviously, I had to build this up if you're presenting. Every time you talk, whether you're presenting a report to your CEO or you're, you know, delivering a keynote at a conference, it's going to be some kind of new idea, right? There's something you want to impart that you think is novel, interesting, relevant, new. And that's the problem, is that, you know, it's not going to be a third, of course, but there's going to be people in each of these camps. Every time you present an idea, some people are going to go, that's great, tell me more, let's move on. Some people are just not going to agree with it, and some people are going to be stuck. And when we're speaking, we forget that we're dividing our audience up into 3 sections all the time. And we just carry on like everybody's in the top section. And when it's a speech, nobody tells you, right? When we're chatting, it's a conversation, right? And we have this word, don't we? We have the word pardon. Pardon doesn't exist anymore in public speaking. That's the problem. Your audience doesn't say, I'm sorry, could you say that again? So you have to preempt that. And if you present something to this section of your audience in you know, a physical environment, you have to acknowledge that you've pointed an idea at a certain group of people. The people over here, the people out there, they may not have got it in the same way that you've just presented it. So cutting to the chase here, this is number 4 here from what I'm going to finish on today. A public speech, a talk like this, like I'm doing now, it is different to a conversation. I have to use repetition and pauses, or I will not be able to communicate effectively, because nobody will tell me when they miss something. And I have to say things in different ways because we're all distracted. You know, can anybody honestly tell me they haven't got something else on their desk or in their hand? Or so? Of course not. You know, I've only got a proportion of your attention at any one time. But that repetition and pauses will allow us to bridge the gap that we would have if we had a conversation and I could check in with you to ask how we're doing. So I will pause there before we go on to starting a speech. And we'll come back to why stories and future focused in a moment. Let's chat with somebody else. I'm choosing people with cameras on, but if anybody wants to give me a wave who would like to speak and doesn't have the camera on, let's have a look. Karate, are you there? Okay. Leah, let's talk to you again for a second, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Can you think back to a talk you've given where, you know, you were leaving part of the audience maybe not exactly where you wanted them to come with you?
Yeah, I think a lot of the time when I'm working with my team, I have to stop and well ask them if what they're feeling about what I'm saying, and constantly they have doubts or there are things that haven't been enough clear. So yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry, English is not my first language, so I'm here actually because I want to improve in public speaking in English. So I get confused and nervous.
That's wonderful to be here. And I hope that we're merging languages anyway, just so that being understood is the key and not speaking a perfect language, but that's maybe just me. That's okay. So that's really good that you've thought about the fact that you're leaving people behind when you present an idea, because it's like being in a meeting and you're speaking to somebody and they go quiet for a while. Well, it's not really quiet for them. They're thinking. You might be sitting there just thinking, this is a long silence, I better fill it, but it's not for them. Their brain is busy and they're reflecting. Karate, I just asked if you had any thoughts on how a speech is different to a conversation and how the danger of leaving people behind without thinking that your audience is breaking into different categories. So I just wondered if you were chatting about that with me for a second. But no pressure, of course. Okay, great. So we're halfway through time already. So I'll hop back up here now. We'll share a few more rules about public speaking. So one of the most important things, of course, is the first impression, whether we're online or whether we're in person. And this is absolutely crucial. If you want people to pay attention for the next 5 minutes or 2 hours or whatever, you've got to start with a great first impression. I'd like to ask, what do people think are the do nots for starting a talk? Let's stop sharing for a second and I'll come back to that in a second. What are the do nots? What should we not do at the start of a speech? Not a panel conversation, but a keynote speech. Don't be late. That's a good one. What else? You can put your mic on if you want.
Bubblegum.
Pardon?
Eating bubblegum.
Eating bubblegum, yes.
Yes, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, what else? Alex, Teresa, what should we not do?
Frowning.
Frowning, okay. Why not?
It gives off the sort of wrong impression and people immediately, I think, sort of put up a barrier, or they start to have thoughts on what your speech is going to be like, or they start judging you, or, you know, it's just like human nature.
Okay, so facial expression, key, mumbling, unprepared. Okay, anything else?
I'd be oversharing something personal. Relating to a personal story is great, but if people start oversharing it might be overwhelming, might just a little bit.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good one. Any more?
What about apologizing? Starting with straight, yeah.
The English one, right? My chief exec was supposed to give this talk today, but she's not well, so I'm really sorry you've got me.
Yeah, or anything. I apologize.
Why would you say that?
Introducing the nervousness, I think that can be a vulnerable and an exercise of transparency, but I'm still not sure that's the best way to start a presentation.
I think that's definitely not the best. I'm sorry, but I got a bit busy and I had to rush my slides today. So sorry about that in advance. It's not a very good presentation. Like, we've actually heard people say this, haven't we?
There's an interesting mention in the comments, fake accent. And it would be interesting to understand, yeah, what Jaisal means by that, because
is that like Ross on Friends, where he has an English accent? He's nervous presenting.
A lot of times when you go into calls into different areas or regions of the world, there are people who want to use the accent of that region. And immediately when you know this is not natural to you, people are, put off. It's a turn off point straight away, because somebody thinks it's like impressing somebody by using an accent. But no, it's not true.
Well, be yourself. I mean, sure. Yeah. Yeah, you've got to, think about.
Yeah, so you have to go with your flow, with what you are comfortable, because it will break the flow sometime if it's not natural to you.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, thanks, Jason. I've got, so the film analogy for this, I mean, we've all seen Bond films, right? Jerry, how does a Bond film start? You look like a Bond fan.
A recognizable theme music, I guess.
No, it doesn't start with the music. The music comes in, doesn't it? Who has watched a Bond film recently?
It starts always with an action scene, so something.
Yeah, it starts in the action, right? I mean, it's not the only film like that. Like, it's in the heat of the moment, and then the music comes in, bam, 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 doesn't it? After what, 3 or 4 minutes. And so this is, for me, how you start a speech. So let's hop back over and have a look at that, the kind of do's and don'ts that I've put on that slide. So there's Daniel Craig. When's it sharing? Not yet. There we go. So this is the faux pas for me that you see. I mean, all the ones that were raised, facial expressions, frowning, not being prepared. Of course, you need to be on that stage, relaxed, focused, prepared. Of course you do. And you need to have got your visuals ready, and you need to know where you need to be, of course. But once you're up there, these are the things that people do. And we've picked up one of them already, haven't we? The last one there, apologize. So common to start with an apology. And so please never do any of these things at the start of your talk, because they're so boring. Like, don't introduce yourself. I saw someone the other day and she said, it's really good to be here. She said, now, before I get to what I want to tell you, I want to tell you a bit about myself. So you've got the context. I'm like, must you? The audience is going to be the judge of whether your content is any good or not. And I suggest you get to it as quickly as you can. So do not introduce yourself. You don't need to prove yourself. They're in the room. Like, definitely you want to put your bio when you're doing the marketing to attract people in there, but when they're not going to leave at the start of the session. So there's no benefit to saying who you are, and only puts you on the back foot. It only says, you should only believe me because I've done these things or I know these things. Why? Why defend yourself? You know why you're on stage. You know why you've been booked. You know that you know things they don't know. Don't introduce yourself. Same for meetings for me. Just don't introduce yourself. Just say what you're working on, what you care about. Don't justify yourself to others, right? This is just my opinion. People want to know about me, they can go on LinkedIn. It's not hard. It's all on there. I don't need to tell them. Don't go through the agenda. I know you can see all these, and I'm reading off the slide now. don't go through your agenda presentation. It's really boring. Don't have a slide that, here's what I, want to be covering today. You can set the scene, right? Of course, but don't go through the agenda. Don't do the chit chat. That's just your nerves. All right, I see Steve's there in the second row. Oh, we had fun last night, didn't we, Steve? It's just for you. It's just you getting comfortable. That's your problem, not theirs. And don't start with some erroneous. This was a Toastmaster one, by the way. Every Toastmaster speech ever would say, put your hand in the air if you've ever put your hand in the air at the start of a speech. And then they talk about something completely different because they read somewhere that you should ask the audience a question at the start. Sure, if it's relevant, but not just for the sake of it. So the point is to get to the point. So which film is this?
Sixth Sense.
Sixth Sense.
Oh my goodness.
Don't make your speech like The Sixth Sense. Don't save the twist for the end. Don't have a big reveal. It's not a thriller movie.
Mm-hmm.
You've got precious time with your audience. Their time is incredibly important. They might not walk out, but you know what? They're going to be thinking, they're going to be daydreaming, they're going to be looking at their phones unless you've got to the point. Don't make it a movie. Don't make it suspenseful. Just straight away. Like when you're delivering a proposal, start with the price. It's going to cost you $3 million. And I'm going to tell you over the next 10 minutes why it's worth you spending that. We must get to the point. And that's one of the, so those are the rules for public speaking. And we'll take a quick pause there, and I'll just have I think there's a chat message, just to make sure I haven't missed anybody's raising it. One of my favorite movies. There was a question actually that popped up a little before. How do you enjoy public speaking? Yeah, Monica, you asked that, didn't you?
Yeah. Basically, I like Veronica earlier, who rushes through her speech because she just wants to get it over with. A lot of us are forced sometimes to speak, and it's not natural. So a lot of the times we do things to like just get it over and done with. So obviously, all the points that you've made makes total sense. But how do you sort of like enjoy yourself doing it? Because I think that's the secret as well, like to enjoy it more, and everything will come, I guess, but it's quite hard when you feel like you're forced to talk.
Okay, say a bit more about that. So forced to talk in terms of you've been summoned to give a presentation. And
yeah, like every week I do a presentation, and obviously I don't want to do it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm listening.
So that, but obviously in terms of speaking panels, maybe I was just relaying it to myself, I'm sorry. But in terms of speaking panels and things like that, I guess you're not forced, you volunteered to be there or asked to join. But I guess in the future, there might be, opportunities where I am going to be expected to present and speak. How do I make it more enjoyable for myself so that it comes through in the speech and the message that I'm delivering, and to increase audience engagement?
Okay. I've got a few thoughts on that, but I'm never suspecting myself to be the smartest in the room. So how would anybody else answer Monica with that in terms of how do you enjoy giving a presentation?
I mean, probably once you set yourself free from the fear, right? Like public speaking and feeling nervous that you're in front of the crowd, that's the tipping point, and when you start enjoying it.
Okay.
Because
I think
as you wish. Alexa, if you've got more to say, then carry on.
No, I just said usually the fear of doing something actually stops you enjoying it, right? I mean,
yeah,
I'm afraid of heights, right? So when I started doing climbing, I was just like getting panic attacks, right? Like until I pushed myself further and further and kind of like removed like a small portion of the fear. And then I actually started enjoying the climbing and the heights. I mean, now I'm still extremely scared, but I'm enjoying the heights. So I think like until you removed some, like at least a part of the fear, you're just like, well, F it, right? And go with the flow, right? do the best way you can and don't put more pressure on yourself.
I'll come to you in a second. Yeah, Veronica, yeah, please.
What I found is that usually it helps if you understand what you fear. I mean, what is your fear? Because ultimately, if you don't know what you fear, you won't know how to deal with it. So you have to actually go back within yourself, and even whether you list it out in your mind or on a piece of paper or whatever, you just have to write down, why do you fear making that speech? Why do you fear speaking in front of other people? And sometimes you could have a variety of reasons. You're not confident enough on the subject. You're afraid that people will judge you. You think that you will look like a fool or whatever it is. But you list it down, and then what I find that it helps me is I put the opposite of that on the next column, just like 2 columns, and I say, I fear this. But actually, I've been in this field for this many years. I know what I'm talking about. Ultimately, there are also people, in the audience just like me. So I find reasons within myself why I should not let that fear control me. So unless you know what you fear, why you fear, and how you can deal with it, then it's going to be hard to remove the fear and enjoy speaking.
Yeah, I mean, in my case, it's more of a, the fact that I feel uncomfortable, right? But I feel that around people in general, and have been for years and probably for the years to come. So, I mean, I understand my problem, my issue, but I mean, it's like, the field I am in, right? Like, no one is really an expert unless they proclaim themselves to be experts. So I'm not, how to say, intimidated by that, but by the fact that there are so many people and it's just so many unknown people. And even if I were just sitting next to them, they would still make me feel uncomfortable, right? And I'm talking to them and they're listening to me, right? Then it just adds another layer of.
Elmira, are you wanting to contribute, or is it just that your microphone's on?
Yes. Well, for me, improv helps a lot. I think I would take a different perspective from this, where if you kind of experiment with topics that you really, really enjoy, not only topics that you are knowledgeable about, but things that are really passionate about, and just doing an improv of 5, 10, 15 minutes and playing with that topic and coming up with these and it could be with friends, or it could be joining a club. I think it helps a lot. But when you go onto topics that really you're passionate about, and then you have to find, a way, a narrative to connect with the audience, I think that helps much more. I mean, that's my perspective, kind of getting outside of your typical, more work focus or career focus public speaking. And then you can add that fun piece element to it. You can add some humor to the context, which always helps. Whereas when you're always too focused on your sort of technical skills and how you're going to communicate that, sometimes you get just too caught up with, the technical piece of it. But that's just a quick, I've joined a lot of clubs, and that helps a lot doing improv. So.
Yeah, that's brilliant, Amira. I mean, Toastmasters is the same as well. I mean, Toastmasters won't teach you how to be a professional speaker, but it will give you chances to speak every single week and be critiqued for it. So it's a great confidence builder, and I think it works very well for that. It's funny, I interpreted the question, Monica, from you slightly differently to the way that it got answered, where it was how do you enjoy public speaking? And I was thinking of it from an art form perspective. Was it Malcolm McLaren who said, the medium is the message? So the joy that I see in it is that it's a unique way of communicating, and there's many. We can send emails, we can write articles, we can make movies, we can paint pictures. There's many ways to communicate, and this is just one of them. But exploring how this medium works is fascinating, I find. And the voice that we have, in a sense, is like an instrument, and it's it's a powerful instrument, and we have to be able to use it. And we can think about the vocality and the reflections and the way that we say things and the notes that we use and the frequencies and the rhythms that we have and how they can make a difference. And it's beautiful, right? I wasn't thinking about the nerves and the fear when that question was asked. I was thinking, how do you find the joy in this medium, this performance medium? And it's an incredible area to study and learn about and practice and develop, and very joyful, I think. Only it's got this shadow over it that we suddenly feel like we're in the spotlight. But apart from that, Veronica, you look like you're going to say something.
No, so when you put it that way, it almost sounds like storytelling.
Sure.
Yeah. Just like you would when you tell a story to a friend or a child or, family member, whoever, is dear to you. Usually you're kind of in the flow. You don't think too much about how you look, how you sound, or, you actually enjoy it because, you want to say it pretty much.
Yes. Yeah, you have fun with it. I mean, I think I once experimented how long I could keep a pause going or something, I think got up to 12 seconds or something, it's just fun. How long will they just wait for me to say the next thing, Just silliness, really. Just one note on humor. Obviously, great to have humor in a speech. Be careful with humor. I mean, don't have any humor that has a butt of the joke, right? Just don't do it, right? It might get a laugh, but it's not worth it. And if you're anyway nervous, don't try and be funny. If you're not relaxed, you won't pull it off, I promise you. If you're tense, you won't be funny, so don't even try. It will just be cringeworthy. But if you're relaxed, then you make a joke in the moment, it'll be wonderful. But don't prepare a joke. And yeah, Veronica.
Richard, I was actually wondering, so for example, for the likes of Monica or myself, and I'm sure that there are others in audience who struggle to breathe properly during delivering a speech, because you try, but from my personal experience during a speech, when it's a silent, everybody's silent and listening to you and everything, and I try to breathe and I find myself that my air goes only up to here, not all the way down in my stomach. It's always here, and I feel like I don't have enough air.
Well, there's a pressure point here, by the way, you can tap, and that just calms your body down if you don't know about that one. So
no, I didn't know. So maybe we should, if you have any tips on that, that would be great to hear.
I mean, there's no secrets. The only thing I'd respond to that is the word It's actually a very valuable word. It tells the person that you're speaking with that you haven't finished yet, and if they could just give you a bit longer. And it's completely useless on the stage. Nobody is going to interrupt you. And so if you can lose the ums and breathe instead, that's the beauty of public speaking. Like I said, it's the downside that nobody will say, I didn't understand that, but no one's going to interrupt you. But we speak like we're about to be interrupted. And it's our time and space completely. And so I think if we can just look around and think, for the next 7 minutes, next 70 minutes, you know how long you've got. This is my time and space. I control it completely. I can use it any way that I want. And barring any bizarrities, no one's going to interrupt. So you've got all the time for breathing then. And the pauses, like we said earlier, they're vital. I think the greatest moment in music ever is the pause after the first stanza in Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. The apprehension, the suspense, the pause before it goes into the next piece of music. So the best musical moment for me is silence with that in mind. But that's music, right? The magic happens in between the notes. The magic happens in between your words as people think differently. You've got to give them that time. And that's plenty of time for breathing, right? What does everybody else think about breathing? welcome. Ludovica.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm late and it's very noisy. So apologies. Nice to see everybody, though.
It sounds like you know a few people here. That's wonderful. Okay, we've got 7 minutes, but as I said, I'll happily hang around. What else is on? Monica, what's on your mind?
Sometimes it's not only the voice, it's not only the breath that you feel like you are not feeling, getting enough air. Sometimes you are starting to shake. And I feel sometimes my knees are starting to shake. And then I feel my body is starting to shake and everything is shaking. And then I think people is seeing that I'm shaking. How can you control that?
I mean, look, it happens, doesn't it? I mean, you hold it. So don't hold a piece of paper in your hand. Don't have anything that amplifies the shakes, right? You know, the ones, if you're shaking, you'll get away with it. But if you're doing that, you won't. So don't advertise it. And have a think about your body, right? If you don't have both feet on the ground, and if you haven't got that, then you won't be able to deliver this talk. I've seen so many speakers who start with 1 foot up, or they're leaning, or, think about this when you're standing on stage, or I don't know, at your desk to a degree. I hadn't really thought about it for online, but what would happen if I walked over and pushed you over? Would you fall over backwards? And if you would, you haven't got the right position. I should be able to walk over to you as you're standing on stage, about to say your first word, shove you, and you shouldn't move. You should be solid. You should be strong. You should have your feet firmly on the ground, and you shouldn't move. So ask yourself that question: could I just be pushed over right now? And then that will make a big difference. Monica.
Your slide on, when you're delivering a speech, and a third of them understand, or what your perception is, or what your data says is a third understand, a third might not understand, and the third might not ask questions. I think by looking at that slide, I realized that I never cared about what the audience thought. I just was so quick to say my piece and be off, be done. But now I'm more aware, consciously aware, that I should maybe make it more interactive or engage the client a lot more. I mean, not the client, the audience a lot more. Yeah, I wasn't really socially aware of what they thought before, so that was good. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And don't get put off by people's reactions. People make funny faces, right? And what looks like disagreement to you might just be deep contemplation or real focus or something like that. And there's many stories about that. The person on the front row who was putting the speaker off, and at the end was the first person that walked over and went, brilliant, you don't know. So you just roll with the punches in that sense. But that's where the reading of the audience and the pauses, and why not be interactive? We host a lot of workshops, and the speakers' interactivity, unless we prompt them, is like Jerry, right? They don't talk. They're just determined to get to the end of the slide deck. And we need to have a better briefing that says the success of this workshop will not be your ability to reach slide 53. Amir, I see your hands up. Just come in there for 1 second. And, I presented the other day with somebody. We had about 35 people in the workshop, and you just watch the number going down, 31, 32, 31, And at 23, I jumped in, see you, Mandy, and just started talking to people, and it didn't budge. 23 didn't move then for the rest of the session. But, maybe we just don't feel we have permission sometimes just to stop and just, talk to somebody. But you must ask somebody a specific question, and it must be an open question. You have to say, Leah, would that resonate with you? Do not go, does anybody have a question about that? Don't ask a closed question to a group. You won't get a response. Leah, your hand's up, so I'll stop talking.
Wait, but I think Elmira put her hand
Yeah, she
up
disappeared
first.
from the screen, but if she's still got her hand up, then that's... Hey, there you are, you're back. Okay.
Yeah, I had a sort of a comment to piggyback on what Monica just said. I was thinking we often fear silence during public speaking, and I think it's very important because even when you listen to music, the beauty really is during those moments of silence. And I think often we just, when we're like, I don't know, forgetting something, just pausing creates suspension, or, like creates, and that's something that I think we don't exercise enough. Like it's always like talking, like Monica said, like you just want to kind of finish your speech and get on. But it's like, why don't we like honor silence? And where should we implement those moments to create engagement, And then again, with your voice, your tone of voice, like slowing it down or speaking it slower, or like toning down the volume of your voice. To, there's like different tricks, obviously, but I just feel like often that's what we fear. Like we fear our own silence, to just like, and I think that's something that, I don't know if we talk about it often in public speaking, probably more than me, but I think maybe that's something that we can kind of mention to be able to like, have these cues, or that we can, tap into during the moments where something just escapes our mind or whatnot.
That's wonderfully put. And that variances in how we speak, and the speed at which we speak, and the pitches we choose, and our pauses. That's what we talked about, the musical instrument, isn't it? That is our voice. And, how many of us remember that it's a musical instrument, and that we can go up as we speak and then come down? How many of us just hang on the one note and just treat it like it's a tool by which to put words out? It's so much more than that. Leah, with you.
Yeah, thank you. A very short question. How do you recommend us to keep the importance of emotion when sometimes we have to make very short presentations like pitches?
Yeah, sometimes I guess it's not going to be appropriate, is it? If you've got a pitch deck to deliver, sometimes the facts will do the job, I guess. I think a little bit like I was saying earlier, all the speakers that don't give themselves permission in our workshops to talk to the attendees. And we love it when they do, and we have to almost force them to, and it's the best thing. So maybe you don't use emotion, but maybe you take the opportunity to ask the questions instead. Yeah, or to ask them how they relate to it, or what experiences they had and stuff like that. You don't need to just tell a story for the sake of it, right? You know the situation. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. It's a sort of way to involve people without like having to talk for longer when you have a very short time span.
I get the point I'm making is that the facts alone won't convince the audience to make the changes that you want. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a climate crisis.
Oh, well, yeah.
The data is very clear and has been for a while. That's not the problem. I think there was, Jaisal, your hand's up.
Yeah, I think I wouldn't leave this opportunity, Richard, to ask you a question, no matter how many times we interact. I think I face this almost every day when you have to, there is so many points in the mind, and your mind is just going through all the points, and you have to summarize or talk in short, and you tend to forget the crunch points sometimes. And I don't know sometimes how to get through that, because after you have already done your short presentation, as was mentioned as the last question, and then you feel, oh, I missed that point. I should have said this. How did I forget that? No matter how many notes you make, and you go through tons of points in your mind in a second, and you forget.
Sure.
So how do you, train your mind not to forget the important points?
I mean, that's a big question, and perhaps we can chat about that once we close the session. But in one sentence, I mean, your speech should have one message. I mean, I'm talking about your keynote kind of talk here, and then you should be reinforcing that message throughout, and that message should be something you could describe in one sentence. But let's chat more about that. And so what I'll do then, it's 7:02 here in the UK. I'm happy to stick around. I'm happy just to talk with you. Really don't ever consider myself to be the expert, but I enjoy hearing your experiences much more than sharing my own. So I'll say that, Veronica, if you're okay with me doing this, I'll say that we're closed and that we'll officially finish. And then let's have a more informal chat, perhaps, for a few minutes after that. Is that okay with you, Veronica?
That's absolutely fine with me. I would like to thank you, Richard, and I would like to thank our sponsor for today who made this session possible, Transact. So we're really grateful for all the support, and thank you everyone for joining, for being with us today, and for making this such an interactive session.
Thanks, Bridget told me to share that slide. I almost forgot. So that's ali.park@transact.com. If you want to learn more about their work, they sound phenomenal. So I would strongly recommend that. They've made this possible. So deep gratitude to them and Bridget and Veronica, of course, as well.